Hey there, good morning everyone. I'm Errol Barnett in for Vladimir Duthier. This Friday we're gathering all the big news stories across the US and around the world. This morning President Trump announces sweeping new tariffs on the EU to start in a matter of days and on Apple. We'll see how markets are responding and we'll bring you what you need to know about these fresh new levies. Plus new details about the murder suspect in the death of two Israeli embassy staffers. What we're learning about the suspect's motives before the shooting. And we're keeping a close eye on the roads and the skies across the nation. We'll bring you the very latest outlook before you head out for the Memorial Day weekend travel rush. But you're in the right place right now. This is CBS News 24/7. All right, so let's begin with markets. They're taking a bit of a hit at this moment. You see the Dow Jones pulling back more than 300 points after President Trump announced major new tariffs on Truth Social this morning. Now, Trump says he recommends a straight 50% tariff on the European Union to begin June 1st. That's just more than a week away. The president called out the EU for, quote, taking advantage of the U.S. on trade. And in a separate post, Trump also threatened Apple with a 25% tariff if it does not begin manufacturing iPhones in the United States. CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand joins us now from the White House with more on this. A bit of a surprise this morning on this, Natalie. No real expectation that these tariffs would be announced. And we know that CEO Tim Cook met with Mr. Trump on Wednesday. So why is the president targeting Apple and the EU now?
Hi, Errol. There's a lot we don't know about what prompted these posts on X or Truth Social. Of course, you mentioned that meeting, which a White House official did confirm occurred with Tim Cook earlier this week. Perhaps the meeting didn't go as well as the president would have liked. So now, days later, we are seeing a threat here. What we don't know is if this is a threat on social media or something that the administration plans to actually carry out. But again, President Trump saying that he told Cook a long time ago that Apple has to make iPhones in the United States or else face this, what he says would be a 25% tariff. As far as the EU goes, this was quite a longer post. He's saying he's making a recommendation of 50% starting June 1st, saying conversations with the EU are going nowhere. We know that there's this negotiation period that's underway between now until July during the reciprocal tariff pause talk period where, the administration is talking to a lot of different countries, including the EU. Clearly, the president doesn't like what he's saying. But again, it remains to be seen whether this is just a threat, a negotiating tactic right now, or something that he actually intends to carry out.
Yeah, and we've seen him use these threats of tariffs as negotiating tactics previously. We're going to bring our viewers more on tariffs in just a moment, but we have also just learned that Harvard is now suing the Trump administration, and this comes after the administration barred the university from enrolling international students. It's uprooting so many people and scrambling young people's plans. Natalie, you went to Harvard. Help us understand what's happening now and what this does for young people.
Yeah, for full disclosure, since I'm presenting, this new reporting, I should note I went to a graduate school program there, which, Errol, I have to say, included a very high percentage of international students. It was part of a government program, and they were a huge and very important part of that program. So Harvard, what we know now, has filed a new lawsuit in response to this administration action. It's the second suit that we've seen Harvard file. In a statement by the university, it says it condemns this unlawful and unwarranted action, saying that it, violates their First Amendment rights, and going on to say it imperils the futures of thousands of students and scholars, nearly 7,000 students who hold visas at that university. Harvard also says that the claim by the administration that it did not comply with requests for information is not true, according to Harvard. Harvard says it did respond, but we know in this statement by the Department of Homeland Security yesterday, if you remember back to April, the DHS Secretary Noem had asked Harvard for information about its foreign students and allegations that they had participated in anti-Semitic protests. The administration saying that Harvard has created an unsafe campus, also lobbing other allegations, which, Errol, are going to play out in court, because that's where this goes next.
Yeah, and we know the U.S. benefits from international students. Many of them that will continue to live here. Sometimes there are exchanges, and so it's important that a resolution is arrived at soon. Natalie Brand with the latest. Natalie, thank you. Let's jump back now to the president's tariffs threat from just a few hours ago. CBS News foreign correspondent Remi Inocencio connects with us from London with the European and UK side of all of this. Remi, I know that this was just announced, but what early reaction are you seeing from European markets and markets there in London?
Absolutely, Errol. Yes, this was a surprise, and every European index is reacting. Every European index is now in the red. Germany and France, Europe's largest economies, getting hit hardest, down as much earlier as 2.5% each. They've walked back a little bit of those losses, but still down. Example for the CAC 40 down 2.25%. The DAX down by nearly 2% there. The FTSE 100 here in the UK down by about 0.7%. That had been down by almost 1% there. Investors here possibly hoping that these new tariffs will hit the continent more than the United Kingdom. But a reminder of the biggest exports to the U.S. that the EU does have: automobiles, Volkswagen, Mercedes there, pharmaceuticals, Sanofi, AstraZeneca, and machine parts, for example, Siemens, worth hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, now potentially in the crosshairs again of these new Trump tariffs. Also a reminder, we're supposed to be, Errol, in that 90-day pause in Trump's global tariff scheme that is supposed to stretch into August. But this shows once again that Trump can change things, does change things. With one social media post, the EU's trade chief is set to have a call with the U.S. trade rep in the next few hours to try to stop what could be a transatlantic trade war.
Yeah, and Remi, you had reported previously that this was the fear in the UK and the EU, which is that the consistency from the US seems to be quite erratic. And meanwhile, you've got China knocking on the door saying we're ready to jump in where the US won't. Let's move our focus now to the war in Ukraine, because there's a major prisoner swap reportedly happening with that nation. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, sure. We're also monitoring this development. Russia's defense ministry is saying that it's now swapped 270 prisoners of war and 120 civilians with Ukraine. Now, in total, the agreement has been 1,000 POWs held by Russia for 1,000 POWs held by Ukraine. Both sides gave lists of names to the other. This swap was agreed to last week. That was when both sides held direct talks in Istanbul. And those were the first since 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said that what is happening today is the only tangible result of that meeting in Turkey. One non-starter that we know was Moscow's reported demand that Kyiv withdraw troops from its own territory in order to get a ceasefire. And then today, again, Trump on Truth Social posted a congratulations to both sides, he said, and that this could lead to something big. But, you know, there's a lot of cynicism about what comes next. Trump spoke to Putin, then dropped his demand for a 30-day ceasefire.
All right, a lot happening in your part of the world. Remi Inocencio with all the latest. Remi, thank you.
Of course.
All right, now to this. The suspect accused of shooting 2 Israeli embassy staff members in Washington, D.C. could now face the death penalty. Elias Rodriguez has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and other crimes. He has not yet entered a plea. Police say he killed Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram as they walked out of an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum Wednesday night. Their loved ones are mourning what would have been soon-to-be engaged couple.
He was a wonderful man. He loved God. He loved his family. He loved his people. He very much loved his country. He believed in what he was doing. I know that he had a lot of deep convictions about his faith, and his family really raised him to be a wonderful man. I'm grieving with them. Our whole community is grieving. This was really one of the best of us.
CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarlane continues to track developments in this story. Scott, what's the latest information from investigators? Because they're piecing together just how horrific that attack was.
They're going through some of Elias Rodriguez's writings, some of his allegedly anti-Semitic and troubling writings from his past. And they also have to go through like this metric ton of surveillance video from that area. This museum is across the street from a Washington, D.C. field office of the FBI. It's near other federal complexes, just saturated with cameras. But to what end is unclear, because according to the charging document in this case, Rodriguez has admitted triumphantly that he was responsible for the shootings. He has been bragging about it. They allege that, as he was taken into custody, he was yelling things like "Free Palestine," things indicative of somebody who has already acknowledged his role in the crime. He's back in court in mid-June. At this point, he faces 5 felonies, one of them the rarely charged murder of federal officials or foreign officials. But the U.S. attorney here, Errol, says more charges could be coming. They could be adding to this. They're investigating this as a hate crime, and they're investigating this as a potential act of terror. As you see there, though, the charging documents say Rodriguez has acknowledged he did this.
And Scott, Steve Jensen, the director at the FBI's Washington field office, called it an act of terror and noted that it was violence directed toward the Jewish community specifically. You've mentioned what the suspect said at the scene. Do we know of any additional evidence that supports this premeditated attack?
Yeah, a really key component of the court filing so far is that Rodriguez allegedly secured a ticket to this event in Washington, D.C. at the Jewish Museum a few hours before the event was to take place, so that he knew where he was going, he knew who would be there, he knew the religious makeup of the attendees. It's worth noting this, Errol. This event, as so many events for people of the Jewish faith in America have seen, did not publicly disclose its location. You had to RSVP and get admission before they tell you where it was. He went through those proactive steps. That's going to be part of their argument in this case.
Yeah, and there's such a chilling effect to this for so many Jewish people there in Washington and around the country. Scott McFarlane, we appreciate your reporting. Thanks. All right, an historic number of people are doing this. They're expected to hit the roads and take to the skies across the U.S. this Memorial Day weekend. The TSA expects to screen some 18 million air travelers. CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve is on the road for us this morning. Let's see, where is he? I think you're in Fairfax, Virginia. Chris, you had a bit of car trouble in the D.C. metro area. We can all relate with that. How do things look, and how are you maintaining a positive outlook?
Well, it's a lot easier to be positive when you're moving and not on the side of the road. So far, so good for us. AAA had expected that traffic would build starting around noon and then you sort of mix in with the Friday night rush hour. So as folks are thinking about getting on the road, before noon or after about 8 o'clock tonight are probably the times to drive. But there's going to be a lot of people driving, and they're going to take advantage of the fact that gas prices are about 40 cents a gallon less than they were this time last year.
And the roads look really good where you are. So this is good advice to get out before noon. And I know that you spoke with earlier Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy about what could happen this weekend. And I'm wondering what stood out to you from that conversation, because there have been issues with air travel for weeks.
Yeah, we were able to have a pretty lengthy conversation with the secretary yesterday afternoon. And, what jumped out to me is just the acknowledgement that the air traffic control system is showing its age. So when we get this big push of summer travelers, it's going to strain the system. And he says his focus is on safety, not efficiency.
Is air traffic control, the aviation system, ready for Memorial Day weekend and this surge of people this summer?
Well, listen, you've seen what's happened in Newark. We're seeing a few cracks or age in the system, right? We're seeing some of that. But yeah, listen, it's ready. It's safe.
How big of a test is this summer, which could be a record again, for the air system and air traffic control?
So we are going to have, I think, historic flights, the biggest summer that we've had in American history. It's going to stress the system. And do I think it's going to be safe? Of course. We're going to get Newark fixed. But are you going to see some disruption in regard to delays? Yeah, you're going to see delays. Is it safe? Yes. I do think we have to have some patience if we have the delays, and then give us some grace to fix what was left to us. Is progressively going to get better as we deploy the new technology into the different airspaces throughout the country.
Of course, Secretary Duffy is asking for tens of billions of dollars to rapidly upgrade the air traffic control system. In the budget bill that just passed the House, Errol, there's about $12.5 billion for FAA modernization. The Secretary says that's not enough. At best, he says it's a down payment to get started.
And it takes time before that money gets spent and we see the upgrades. Almost lunchtime, Chris. I'd highly recommend for you and your crew maybe a Sheetz, maybe a Wawa. They can be some of the best aspects of on-the-road travel. I know you know all about them. Stay safe out there and have a great weekend. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Errol. You too.
All right, CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Souza has a first look at your national forecast. You've had a Sheetz or a Wawa, Tammy, right? I mean, this is like staples
Wawa.
on the road
This is Wawa
travel.
country. Are you kidding?
Exactly,
Everybody loves Wawa here, so it's all Wawa. You get on the road, you look for a Wawa. You map them all out. That and there's a couple of other places, too. Okay, so Chris is on the road. He is not going to want to deal with anything in the center of the country. Look at this. We do have a severe weather risk, and this is all up and down the plains from the northern to the central and southern plains. Big storms expected there. This includes tornadoes, large hail-damaging winds, and flooding. Now, this is going to take place into tomorrow, but look at the risk that we're going to be dealing with tomorrow. Almost the same place. And then we go into Sunday, almost the same place, where you see the yellow. That is a level 2 out of 5. And yes, we could see the tornadoes, the flooding, the heavy rain. This continues right on into Monday. It shifts slightly south right into the heart of Texas. And we are going to be looking at the potential of some flooding. This is the flood risk by the time that we get into Sunday, because this whole area will be saturated with rain. We'll talk more about where the heat is on and your travel forecast when I come back in a couple of minutes. Errol?
All right, cool. Looking forward to it. Tammy, thank you. Coming up next for you all, we're learning about the victims from this. It was that fiery plane crash in San Diego that we first brought to you around this time yesterday. We're going to take you there live next with what we're learning. And get this, our political show, it's getting refreshed. Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, you can catch the premiere of The Takeout with Major Garrett. His weekly podcast, after 8 years, is now a nightly show right here on CBS News 24/7. And there's more. CBS News 24/7 Primetime launches as well. This will be a jam-packed 90-minute show featuring breaking news, in-depth reporting, and all the best CBS News has to offer without me. 5 nights a week. 24/7 Primetime airs at 7:30 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News 24/7. Welcome back. A teenager from Georgia has been released from ICE custody. What you're looking at is Jimena Arias Cristobal returning home, being greeted by her family overnight. Just look at that embrace. Cristobal was arrested for allegedly making an improper turn while driving earlier this month. She came to the U.S. from Mexico when she was 4. Her charges were eventually dropped, and an immigration judge granted her bond on Wednesday. However, ICE is still working to deport her. All right, we're learning new details about the victims in this deadly private plane crash that we brought you to in San Diego yesterday. Investigators are trying to piece together how this happened. People who live in the area are waiting to hear when they can get back into their homes. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans is in San Diego on the scene. It's still very early, Carter, but what at this stage do we know about this horrific crash?
Well, first I heard you talking about people getting back into their homes, and it's probably not going to be today for most of them because the NTSB is going to be out here today. They have preserved this scene here exactly as it was after the crash occurred. So they're going to have a full NTSB team out here today taking a look at the entire crash scene, trying to piece things together, seeing what happened. And then they're planning on removing the plane parts on Saturday. And then they've got the fuel cleanup to do after that because it smells all like jet fuel around here. So it's probably going to be a couple days before people could get back into their homes. What we do know right now about this plane crash is that it started with some power lines not too far away, just a couple hundred yards away. It was very foggy when the plane was coming and apparently clipped those power lines. Then a light pole, it came down right through here, hit the street, knocked that car into the living room of that house. That is the living room right there. There were people sleeping upstairs at the time. They're all okay. Everybody was evacuated. But again, I mentioned there was a lot of jet fuel. It was flowing down the street. So there were streaks of fire down the street here. And that's what people woke up to yesterday morning. Surprisingly, maybe a miracle of sorts, there were no serious injuries on the ground. There were 6 people on the plane, 2 confirmed dead at this point, but all of them believed to be dead. Aaron?
I'm stunned by seeing the hole in that house, Carter. I mean, they may be okay, but a plane will never fly over their head the same way again. You were telling me earlier this morning that, you know, these folks know they live in a flight path. You may not know the answer to this question, but who is responsible for the damage to the house? Is this something typically covered by insurance? I have no idea. You may not know, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, you know, it's going to be interesting. I mean, generally, aircraft do carry insurance as well. This is a naval housing complex here, so the Navy is taking care of all the folks that live here, so that's the good news there. But they do have a lot of cleanup here to do, and certainly this house is going to be a total loss at this point.
Yeah, and you have the damage from all the fire and the cars. Just a mess. Great to have you there, Carter, speaking with folks and on the scene. Carter Evans in San Diego. All right, coming up next, explosive new testimony in Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial. We're going to recap fresh allegations against the rap mogul and look at what comes next in the trial. You're in the right place, streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, we want to quickly show you this. This is Annapolis, Maryland. Vice President J.D. Vance delivering the commencement speech at the Naval Academy.
You will be leaders of men and women.
Inspiring the next generation there. All right, and now here's a quick look at some of the top stories we are following for you this Friday. A third woman has been arrested for her role in last week's New Orleans jailbreak. Police say she helped one inmate before and after their escape. She's facing felony charges, and she is the 4th person arrested and accused of being a co-conspirator in the jailbreak. And today, the manhunt continues as 5 of the 10 inmates are still out at large. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is reportedly furious over a failed attempt to launch a new warship. He was in person at today's launch ceremony, which resulted in a severely damaged ship. Satellite images show the vessel partially submerged, laying on its side. You see it right here, and now it's covered in a blue tarp. Kim is calling this a criminal act, and officials are looking to make arrests for those deemed responsible. The CDC says a new COVID variant has been detected across multiple states, and this is a strain linked to a surge in cases in China. Officials say the NB181 strain was reported in arriving international travelers at airports in California, Washington State, Virginia, and New York. Experts are watching this closely as this new variant is on the rise in parts of Asia as well. But Hong Kong authorities say there's no evidence this strain is more severe than others. We'll, of course, keep watching that for you. And now to this, the sex trafficking and racketeering trial against Sean Diddy Combs, it will resume on Tuesday, but testimony from rapper Kid Cudi, whose name is Scott Mescudi, spoke Thursday about his brief relationship with Combs' ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, back in 2011. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman joins me here in Studio 55 with more on all of this. You've been in the courthouse all week. Great to see you again, Katrina. Before a long break, it's key for the jury because whatever was said yesterday now sits with them for the long weekend. So what did we learn from yesterday's testimony that we hadn't heard before?
Well, for one, we heard from Scott Mescudi, also known as the rapper Kid Cudi, and he's someone who had come up a bunch on the stand. Cassie Ventura had testified about how they were briefly romantically involved, and this was a relationship, Errol, that really angered Sean Combs, she said. And supposedly at one point, Combs threatened to blow up Mescudi's car. He said it would happen while they were out of the country. It wouldn't be linked back to him. In her 2023 civil lawsuit that she brought, she said that his car did blow up around that time, and we learned from Mescudi that that did in fact happen, that shortly after Sean Combs learned about his relationship with Cassie Ventura, first Combs supposedly broke into his home, and then a little bit after that, his Porsche was just damaged with a Molotov cocktail. Now, there were no witnesses, but he says that he knows that Combs did this. And he also said, Errol, after that happened, he felt like things had just escalated. They had to meet. He set up this meeting with Combs at the Soho House in Hollywood, and he described it as there was this window in the room, and he said Combs was standing in front of it with his hands behind his back like a Marvel supervillain. As they met, they sort of made peace, and as they shook hands at the end, he said he wanted to make sure he was holding Combs' hand, and he said to him, "What about my car?" And Combs said, "I don't know anything about your car," although he then said years later that Combs took him aside. They also saw each other at the Soho House again, and he just apologized for everything. He didn't specify what, but this ties to these arson charges that are in this case.
Okay, because that was my follow-up question. You know, much of what we've heard right now from Cassie Ventura, it's uncomfortable, it's awkward, but they were allegedly consenting adults. Where so far has there been proof of this crime of sex trafficking and racketeering, or have we not seen that direct link just yet?
I think that we're seeing the foundations of this case, because at the heart of the racketeering is one that there were other people involved in this criminal enterprise, but that it was all happening at the direction of Sean Combs. So we've been hearing about security guards and testimony from his former personal assistants who talked about actions they did that are tied to this scheme in the allegations. And everyone keeps saying that they were always acting at the direction of Combs. When Ventura was in these freak-offs with him, he was directing them, she said. One of his assistants talked about how he was always executing Combs's orders. And then there's also this aspect of force, violence, intimidation that was tied to these crimes like bribery, the arson we just talked about. So we're hearing about this pattern of threats, violence, intimidation, moments where people felt threatened that he would release videos about them, like explicit sex tapes of Cassie Ventura. One of his assistants even said there was just sort of an embarrassing video of him dancing. And Combs commented, "I'm going to keep this in case I ever need it." So we're hearing all of his testimony, and the prosecution, I think, really still needs to bring this together for the jury. With the sex trafficking too, Ventura talked about how, she didn't want to participate in these acts, but that she felt like Combs was in control of her career, her finances, her life, really, and so she felt obligated to participate. Now, his side says that she was a consenting adult, but so much of this just might be jury perception, and then how the prosecution links all of this for them in the end, because there's a lot more to build. There's going to be about 4 more weeks of prosecution testimony.
Yeah, their strategy seems to be have a star witness first, leave an impression with the jury, and then kind of leave the slam dunk for later. Katrina Kaufman, great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Errol.
Right now, the TSA is managing a surge of air travelers, and they will all Memorial Day weekend. We know that many of you have concerns about air traffic control issues that we've been reporting across the U.S., and it includes in Denver, where the FAA confirmed that pilots were unable to communicate with the tower for 2 minutes. 2 full minutes earlier this month. CBS News Denver reporter Justin Adams joins us now from Denver International Airport. It looks like there's people moving just so slowly behind you, Justin. Good morning to you. But maybe it's an illusion. How smooth is the morning travel there?
Well, it is smooth, but it doesn't mean that there are not a lot of people, Errol. I want you to take a look at how things are looking right now at Denver International Airport. And you can see there's just a constant flow of individuals moving through the airport, looking to go and get through the TSA checkpoints just to be able to get to their flights on time. And this is one of the busier days that we're expecting at Denver International Airport. They're expecting today and Memorial Day to be the 2 busiest days. And over the Memorial Day travel weekend, they're expecting more than 443,000 people to make their way through Denver International Airport. And this is not just here at DIA, but also on the roads as well, as AAA is estimating 87% of travelers nationwide, or 39 million people, are going to make their travel on the road. So as you can see right now with everything that's going on at Denver International Airport, it's about a 7-minute wait for you to go through all the security checkpoints. So things are going just fine so far. But hopefully, like you said earlier, we don't have any snafus that would make things a little bit more stuck, to say the least, here at the airport.
Yeah, I just saw a guy walking around in flip-flops. I wish I had the confidence in other people to walk and travel in flip-flops so my toes wouldn't get crushed. Have you had a chance to speak with anyone, though? Because I'm wondering if there are concerns from travelers about the comms blackout that we just mentioned and any anxiety about them getting to where they want to go.
You know what's interesting? A lot of people aren't concerned about that. They actually just want to go and get to their destination. It is pretty much a cheery time right now. And it's very interesting when you talk about what's going on even at Denver International Airport. Just like you said a couple of weeks ago that there was that issue for about 90 seconds where there was the communication issue. But ever since then, people are okay with flying right now. And actually, the FAA is expecting that this will be the busiest weekend or the busiest summer travel season that we will see in the last 15 years. So it's not really dissuading individuals from going and saying, hey, I won't travel. People are going to say, look, I want to go and get on a plane. I want to travel and I want to get to my destination safely and go and see family or go out to a vacation where you might be able to wear some of those flip-flops as well.
Yeah, hopefully, you know, you want to arrive with all your toes intact. Justin Adams, great to chat with you, joining us from Denver.
That's right.
Let's cross over to CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Souza, who always has great footwear. You wouldn't ever travel in flip-flops, right? I mean, that's crazy to me. Okay, maybe you would.
I have.
Tammy, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
It depends. It just depends on where you're traveling. But you know what? You are always dressed so great. So the flip-flops would look fabulous on you. And no, if I was really in a crowded space, you know, I wouldn't do that at all. You know, but I am wearing open-toed shoes today, you know, in honor of the holiday weekend. Okay, I'm going to be outside doing some gardening. How about you? What are you going to be doing?
I will be heading to a concert this weekend. A young lady named Beyonce, an up-and-comer, is performing here in the New York City area. So hoping to make it there.
Yeah. That newbie. All right, we'll get to that in just a moment. I think you'll be lucky. But if you're in the heartland anywhere, we're going to be looking at this storm system pounding day after day, starting this afternoon all the way into Monday. So that's going to be a bit of a mess if you are going to be anywhere across the plains, into Dallas, into the Tennessee Valley, even into the upper Midwest. All right, let's talk about what's going to go on. If you're going to that concert, guess what? This pesky nor'easter, late season nor'easter, is going to finally get out of here. There could be some wraparound sprinkles and showers today, but for the most part, this thing is going to leave and we're going to end up with cool but sunny conditions. So things should be pretty good for the concert. Now, if you're going to be out and you're going to be traveling around the next couple of days, here's your Saturday. We're going to be looking at big heat in the south. Look at that, 90s across Texas and the southern portion of Florida. You get up the eastern seaboard, we're going to be looking at the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Out west, we're going to be looking, of course, in the desert southwest at the heat with the 90s there. And then we move into our Sunday. Looks like that rain still pounding the center portion of the country. Temperatures, though, still hot in the south, starting to warm up along the eastern seaboard. A little bit cool if you're out along the west coast, only the 60s there. And finally, we're going to be looking at what happens as far as all of these numbers, the sunshine. I want you to look at how many sunshines that we have out there. Quite a few of them. It looks like we're going to actually have fairly decent weather unless you are across the plains, into Texas, into portions of the deep south and the Tennessee Valley. That's where it's not going to be good. But you're going to have nice weather for the concert, so enjoy yourself, Errol.
Thank you for that, Tammy. It looks like it'll be a wet weekend for a lot of folks across the country. So, you know, you'll have company. We'll see you again later this hour. Thanks so much. All right, still to come for you all. This weekend marks 5 years since George Floyd died at the hands of police. Next, we'll focus on how the city is reflecting on the death and how law enforcement has changed in the years since. You're in the right place, streaming CBS News 24/7. This weekend marks 5 years since the death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. Former police officer Derek Chauvin is serving a federal sentence of more than 20 years in prison for depriving Floyd of his constitutional rights. Chauvin was also found guilty on state murder charges. Now, we're not showing you that painful video, but you may remember Chauvin was kneeling on Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes with Floyd pleading, "I can't breathe." It sparked outrage and investigations into the police department that uncovered evidence of excessive force and discrimination, prompting systemic changes. The Minneapolis mayor at the time was Jacob Frey. He spoke to CBS News about what's changed in the last 5 years.
But I can tell you that we're making progress. Are we there yet? The answer is no. We all have a lot of work to do, but the progress that we are making is real. Our police department is more diverse than it's ever been before. We're bringing recruits on that want to be the change right now.
CBS News Minnesota reporter Reg Chapman joins us now. You were, of course, in Minneapolis during Floyd's killing. You reported on the legal fallout. Reg, what do you remember from that weekend 5 years ago? And I think one of the changes the police department made was hiring people living closer to the city. Have things changed as you might have expected?
Well, not quite changed. We talk about that, but history was made when people from all walks of life did come together to fight for racial justice and police reform, and it all sparked right here in Minneapolis. 5 years later, there is mixed reaction on how far we have come. Some say they do see incremental change when it comes to police and community relations, especially with the black community. Others say not much has changed, while there is a small percentage of people who believe things are worse because of what they see as racial division and diversity, inclusion and equity rollbacks in both business and government.
And Reg, I know that you spoke to the former police chief of the Minneapolis Police Department about at least the efforts that have been made, that they continue to try and make to implement reforms. I just want to play a portion of that for our viewers.
They laid out an absolute groundbreaking, innovative memorandum of agreement with the Minneapolis Police Department that really touches on a lot of the key points that, quite frankly, a federal consent decree would have enacted anyway. Use of force, de-escalation, education, cultural competency, recruitment, rehiring.
So what do you make of that? Because on one level, it's just paperwork, and you also have the end of federal oversight of the Minneapolis Police Department. Culturally, have you not seen or felt a difference considering all the effort that's being made?
Well, we are seeing a more diverse police department here in Minneapolis, and we are seeing people from the community actually serving and protecting. Well, Mayor Jacob Frey does say the city will follow this federal consent decree to the letter, and many of the recommendations for reforms are already in play, and the city has money stockpiled to make sure there are funds for these reforms, from hiring of those qualified officers with character and for paying for their training to make sure they understand. There is already that memorandum of agreement the former chief talked about. The city, the police department, and this community group, Unity and Community Mediation Team, implemented more than 2 decades ago. And it does deal with many of the same issues the federal consent decree covered. There is a big push right now to dust off that document and work with community to make sure everyone has a stake in making the police department and the city better for all.
Yeah, I know you had said in some cases it may have been worse. You know, there are these calls now to pardon Chauvin on the federal charges. Tell us about that.
Well, as for now, those calls to pardon Derek Chauvin are just rumors. It's just talk. There have been high-level talks with the governor and local, county, and state law enforcement officials preparing for any reaction in case there is an actual pardon. But we are being told that if there is a federal pardon, Chauvin will not be released from prison, but serve out the rest of his state sentence of 22 years here in Minnesota.
Okay, Reg Chapman, we appreciate you joining us, and we want to let our viewers know that you can watch more of Reg's reporting on CBS News Minnesota. You can also watch more of Mayor Frey's interview here on CBS News 24/7 in the 2 p.m. hour. Reg, thanks so much. Great to connect with you. We'll be right back.
This explains the handcuffs. It's still not clear why he's here. If we want to bring the world back from the brink, we have to deal with him. Should he choose?
That is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, starring another up-and-comer, Tom Cruise, very talented young guy. It's out in theaters today. The film follows agent Ethan Hunt as he works to stop a rogue artificial intelligence that can destroy mankind. Screen Rant theatrical movie editor Cooper Hood is here with more on this. I am very pleased to see all those DVDs behind you, this millennial, very old school. You know, I was invited to a screening this week. You've seen the film, so no spoilers for everyone, but what makes this worth a watch?
You know, I think it's really just about the conclusion of Ethan Hunt's story, and just getting a chance to go back to the big screen to see it. It is very thrilling, and I think really, it's the final set piece involving planes. It is something that even as you watch it, Tom Cruise is doing his own stunts and doing it all as practically as he can. And, I just could not understand how they could do that for real. It was mind-blowing.
Yeah, you always want to think, how did they really pull that off? And this is a time when movie studios are trying to convince the rest of us to get back into the movie theater and see these tentpole films. So let's talk about expectations, because fans, like us, of course, we want to see those epic stunts. Maybe we want to see some sprinkling of an engaging storyline and some good acting. But do people need to have seen any of the, 7 movies yet to enjoy this one?
I think seeing the previous ads that you would get with Final Reckoning. But also, if you haven't seen any of them, the movie does a pretty good job of recapping and telling you what happened before, so you can follow along with what's happening.
And don't you know it, Cooper Hood, we've got an artificial intelligence villain hacking our hit. So the audio isn't coming through, but we've got most of what you said, and very cool to see DVDs behind you. We should encourage folks to see the movie. Thank you so much. And as a quick reminder, you can watch the Mission Impossible movie series, on Paramount Plus, and you can see Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning right now in theaters. Now? Today? Yes, today. All right, and now to this. I learned things in real time on this show. University of Maryland graduates made that rainbow connection as they were able to they were enjoying a commencement speech by none other than Kermit the Frog. The famous amphibian shared life advice, one of his iconic songs, and he warned students to avoid the urge to succeed at the expense of others. Watch.
Rather than jumping over someone to get what you want, consider reaching out your hand and taking the leap side by side, because life is better when we leap together. The lovers, the dreamers, and me. Thank you.
It's kind of a trippy moment, though, for a lot of those students. Jim Henson was an alumnus of the school. There's a portrait of him, as well as a statue. He's there with his A-list frog, and it's eternal. Kermit really getting into it. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Souza. She's got her shoes on, and a last look at your national weather forecast. Tammy?
Yeah, don't you just love it when you get the best life advice from a Muppet? Dr. Seuss does the same thing. So, maybe that's the simple way to go. You know what? It's going to be one of those weekends where, depending on where you live, you're going to see a little bit of everything. You probably don't want to see much if you're going to be across the plains and parts of the Tennessee Valley. But the heat today, take a look at where the heat is. It is across Florida. The deep south, we see some of the heat. Going through Texas, we're in the upper 90s. We are knocking on the door of 100 and right on into the desert southwest. Now, if we take the northern tier, especially up here in the Northeast, it's been really cool, much cooler than average. We are going to see that improve as the weekend wears on, but that's where we're cool today. That's where we have the 50s and the 60s. And across the midsection of the country, we have the 60s and the 70s. So a little cooler than average for most of us, unless you're in the south. And that's where you're seeing these extremely warm temperatures. This is a loop of what's going to go on through your weekend. We are going to continue to be very hot from the southwest across Texas and the deep south. We will be stormy across the plains and into the Tennessee Valley, and we will be much cooler than average, but with improving weather and sunshine finally moving into the Northeast. So all in all, it is going to be busy. If you're traveling, any delays, they're likely going to come out of Dallas and up and down the plains. That's where we're expecting to have perhaps the worst of the airport delays. Errol, back to you, and have a great holiday weekend.
Thank you, Tammy. You know what? When you get traveling, Tammy, Souza, and your toes, I hope they get to their destinations safely and comfortably as well. Great chatting with you today and all week. Thanks so much. And you know what? It's been fun filling in for Vlad this week. I want you all to enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. I will see you next week on the CBS Morning News. Our good friend and neighbor, Mugo Odigwe, enters this cool VR studio next with all your breaking news from coast to coast. You're in the right place. This is CBS News 24/7. Have a great weekend.